It was a sunny Tuesday morning in September when Jasmine Thompson boarded Flight 1223 from Atlanta to Chicago. She wasn't the type to splurge often, but this time she'd treated herself to first class. It wasn't about showing off, but about making the long trip to an important board meeting just a little more comfortable. The meeting could make or break her tech startup. If this is your first time here, you're in for a real treat. Trust me, you won't want to miss this story or the countless others waiting for you on our channel. We've got plenty more that'll keep you hooked from start to finish. Be sure to follow, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from you, and we've got some exciting stories lined up that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Jasmine slipped into her seat, a modest black blazer over a simple blouse, her tablet open in front of her as she reviewed her presentation. She was a woman who knew how to hustle. 2 kids at home, a business growing fast, and a heart set on making a real impact. She wasn't new to first class, but she wasn't exactly the type of passenger you'd expect to see there, at least not if you were looking from the perspective of Bradley Mitchell, a flight attendant with a reputation for picking favorites. Bradley had been with Skylink Airlines for over a decade. He'd seen all kinds of people pass through the first-class cabin, but today he couldn't help but feel something was off about Jasmine. He couldn't put his finger on it, but the way she carried herself didn't scream money. She didn't have the right look, didn't wear the right brand. As he passed through the cabin with his usual flair, offering drinks and small talk, Bradley made sure to check on everyone in first class. But he always seemed to pause just a little too long when he walked past Jasmine. She wasn't doing anything wrong, sitting quietly, immersed in her work, but for some reason, Bradley was determined to make her feel uncomfortable. When he finally approached her, he didn't bother with pleasantries. "Ma'am, could you please put that device away?" he said, without the warmth that came with his usual routine. Jasmine looked up, slightly taken aback. "Oh, sure," she said, tucking her tablet into her bag. Bradley gave a curt nod and walked away, a little smirk curling at the corner of his mouth. But it wasn't the last time she'd feel that strange chill. The rest of the flight felt increasingly uncomfortable for her. Every time Bradley passed by, he'd give her that same look, like he was sizing her up. A couple of hours into the flight, Jasmine had to use the restroom. When she returned, her seat was slightly reclined. It wasn't much, but enough to make her raise an eyebrow. She settled back in and noticed something strange on the floor near her feet, a folded piece of paper. She picked it up, unfolded it, and saw it was a note. It was written in flight attendant's handwriting. "Please don't get too comfortable. Some of us are still working hard for our seats." Jasmine felt a cold anger wash over her. This wasn't just a case of bad service. It was personal. She stood up immediately and made her way to the galley where Bradley was talking to another flight attendant. "Bradley," she said, her voice steady but sharp, "I found this under my seat." Bradley froze, his eyes widening. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said quickly, but Jasmine wasn't buying it. She held the note up to him. "Don't play dumb. You think you're clever, don't you?" Bradley's face shifted for a moment. He tried to hide it, but the smug expression returned, more confident now. "Look, ma'am, you're in first class, but you should know that doesn't mean everyone else thinks you belong there." Jasmine's pulse quickened, but she kept her composure. "I've had enough of this." Before Bradley could respond, The captain's voice came over the loudspeakers, signaling that they were beginning their descent into Chicago. "Please, prepare for landing," the captain said. Jasmine turned on her heel, not giving Bradley another moment of her time. She was about to return to her seat, but as she walked past the first-class curtain, she noticed the conversation in the galley had stopped. The other flight attendants were watching. All eyes were on her. The plane landed, and passengers began to disembark, but Jasmine wasn't in a rush. She had a little more business to take care of before she left. She approached the front of the plane, where Bradley was still in the galley, looking busy, but clearly avoiding her gaze. "Bradley," she said, her tone now calm but deadly serious, "I'm sure you've heard of me. Jasmine Thompson. I own the Thompson Group, the tech company that handles most of your airline's IT infrastructure." Bradley's face drained of color. He didn't recognize her at first, but when she mentioned the company, it clicked. The Thompson Group was one of the biggest tech firms in the country. And Skylink? They were one of their biggest clients. Jasmine stood tall, her eyes locked on his. "Let me make this clear. I'm the reason you're still working. You might want to rethink how you treat the people who help keep your airline in business." Bradley opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. He was frozen, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. "And just so you know," she continued, her voice icy now, "if this kind of treatment continues, I'll be sure to make a few calls. And I'm sure Skylink will be very interested in hearing about your little attitude problem." With that, Jasmine turned on her heel and walked off the plane, leaving a stunned Bradley behind. Jasmine Thompson's flight home was smoother than the one she'd had going to Chicago. She'd made her point, and as the plane touched down, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. She wasn't just fighting for her business, she was fighting for respect. And sometimes that's the most powerful thing you can do. Skylink Airlines, they learned a valuable lesson that day. Never underestimate the quiet passenger in seat 2A, because you never know who they might be. It was an unusually hot morning for late September in Dallas, Texas, but for Jasmine Thompson, the weather didn't matter. She was heading to the airport, her mind buzzing with anticipation. This trip wasn't just about another business meeting. It was the meeting, the one that would either secure her tech startup's future or risk everything she'd worked for. Jasmine had spent years building her company, a small but rapidly growing tech firm that specialized in providing advanced software solutions to large corporations. In the tech world, every deal could be a game changer. Today's meeting with a potential investor could mean millions for her company, possibly even a merger. But she wasn't just excited. She was nervous. Every moment of this flight would be a moment closer to everything changing. She arrived at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, breezing through security with ease. After a quick stop at the gate, she handed over her boarding pass to the gate agent and walked down the jet bridge towards her plane. This time, she had treated herself to a first-class seat. Not because she was trying to show off, far from it, but because she'd earned it. After years of late nights and countless hours of sacrifice, she was finally in a position to afford a little luxury. Her seat was 2A, on a Skylink Airlines flight heading from Dallas to Chicago. The plane was a Boeing 737, comfortably sized for this short flight, and as she settled into the plush chair, Jasmine relaxed for a moment. feeling the tension in her shoulders begin to fade. She adjusted her tablet, ready to go over her presentation one last time before takeoff. That's when she noticed him. Bradley Mitchell, the flight attendant, was walking down the aisle with his usual air of confidence, his uniform neatly pressed, his smile sharp. He greeted the passengers in first class with a polite, professional tone, but Jasmine couldn't help but notice the way his eyes lingered just a bit too long on her. His smile seemed less warm than it should have been, almost forced. Bradley had seen a lot of first-class passengers in his years with Skylink Airlines, but Jasmine didn't fit the usual mold. She wasn't wearing the latest designer clothes. Her jewelry wasn't flashy. She wasn't speaking loudly on a cell phone or wearing sunglasses indoors. In his eyes, she looked ordinary, and ordinary didn't belong in first class. Jasmine didn't know it, but Bradley had already made up his mind about her. He didn't think she belonged in the front of the plane. He didn't know who she was, but he assumed she was just another corporate worker who had paid for the seat with a discount or some special offer. As the plane took off, Jasmine slipped into her own world, reviewing her notes. Meanwhile, Bradley moved through the cabin, offering drinks and snacks, his eyes darting over the first-class passengers, making small talk where it was required. Every time he passed by Jasmine, he didn't make eye contact as he had with the others. He barely acknowledged her presence, but Jasmine noticed. She felt an uncomfortable chill every time he was near. The first few hours of the flight passed without incident. Jasmine tried to focus on her work, but there was something about Bradley's attitude that kept nagging at her. The small, subtle dismissals, a delayed drink order, the lack of eye contact, the way he stood too close when handing her something, made her feel like she was being judged. It wasn't just the normal, impersonal service you sometimes get on a flight. It felt personal. Then it happened. About 2 hours into the flight, Jasmine needed to use the restroom. She stood up and made her way down the aisle, noting how quiet the plane was. When she returned to her seat, she noticed something odd. Her seat was slightly reclined, more than she had left it. She frowned. Was it just her, or had someone adjusted it while she was gone? When she sat down, she glanced to the side and saw a small piece of paper crumpled under the seat cushion. She picked it up, her fingers brushing the smooth edge of the note. It was folded neatly, almost intentionally placed there. She opened it carefully, her heart racing as she read the handwritten message in bold, looping letters. Please don't get too comfortable. Some of us are still working hard for our seats. Jasmine's heart sank. The note was too specific, too deliberate. She knew exactly what this was. She knew who had left it. The flight attendant, Bradley. Her first instinct was to laugh it off, but something about it felt wrong. So wrong. She stood up, folded the note in half, and marched straight to the galley at the front of the plane. Bradley was standing there, chatting with a fellow flight attendant, when she walked up to him. "Bradley," she said, her voice steady but sharp, "I've found this under my seat. Care to explain?" Bradley turned, his face immediately going pale as he saw the note in her hand. He stammered, I don't know what you're talking about." His response was automatic, but there was an unmistakable tension in his eyes now. Jasmine didn't back down. She could feel the blood rush to her face, the heat of indignation growing. "Don't lie to me. You know exactly what this is. You think because I'm not dressed in a $5,000 suit or wearing a flashy watch that I don't belong in first class." Bradley's eyes flicked nervously to the side. "Ma'am, I didn't—" "Cut the crap, Bradley," she interrupted, her voice cold but controlled. "You've been treating me differently since I sat down, and I don't appreciate it. So let me make this clear. I've had enough of this." The plane had begun its descent, and the captain's voice came over the intercom, signaling that they were preparing to land. But Jasmine wasn't finished. "Just so you know, I don't come from money like you might think," she continued, her voice lowering. "But I own the company that handles nearly all of this airline's IT services. Skylink depends on my firm. You're not just insulting me, you're insulting the very people who keep this airline running. You're insulting yourself." Bradley's face turned a shade of red she hadn't thought possible. His eyes widened in disbelief. He stuttered, but no words came out. Jasmine didn't give him the chance to say anything more. "You're lucky I'm not making a scene right now. But believe me, if you ever treat me or anyone this way again, I'll be sure the executives at Skylink know exactly how you've been treating your passengers." With that, she turned and walked back to her seat, leaving a stunned Bradley behind. The aftermath was immediate. As the plane touched down at O'Hare International Airport in Chicago, Jasmine knew this wasn't over. It was far from over. But as she left the plane, she felt a strange sense of peace wash over her. She had spoken her truth, and she knew she'd done the right thing. But what would happen next? The very next day, Jasmine received a phone call from Skylink Airline's customer service department. The representative on the line was polite, but clearly uncomfortable. "Ms. Thompson," she said, "we deeply apologize for the behavior of one of our flight attendants during your recent flight. We take such matters very seriously, and we're conducting a full investigation. We value your business and will do everything we can to make this right." Jasmine raised an eyebrow. She hadn't expected this. The situation was escalating quickly, but she wasn't done. "Thank you," she said, her voice cool, "but I think you should also know something else. I've been the one keeping this airline running for years. I'm the reason you have these contracts. If you don't take this seriously, you'll lose a very valuable client." That phone call set in motion a chain of events that no one, including Bradley, saw coming. What happened next will surprise you. Skylink's executives immediately reached out to Jasmine to arrange a private meeting. The company not only apologized, but also acknowledged the potential consequences of losing her business. They assured her that they would take action against Bradley and would be reviewing their policies regarding first-class treatment. As for Bradley, he was suspended pending investigation, and Jasmine's firm, now in a position of power, became one of Skylink's most influential partners. Word of the incident spread quickly within the company, and those who had once dismissed her began to see her in a new light. Bradley learned a hard lesson that day. Never judge a book by its cover. You never know who you're dealing with. And sometimes the people you think are the least likely to make a difference are the very ones who have the most power to change everything. The twist of fate. Jasmine continued to build her company into an empire. Her once small firm was now the go-to tech provider for some of the biggest names in the aviation industry. And every time she boarded a flight, she made sure to check the crew list, just in case she needed to remind anyone. Never judge a person by their appearance, because you never know who's holding the strings. After the meeting with Skylink's executives, Jasmine felt a sense of relief, but also a tinge of disbelief. She'd been prepared for a standard apology, maybe even a voucher or some token gesture of goodwill. But what had happened was far beyond that. The executives were serious. They weren't just apologizing, they were making changes. And that was just the beginning. 2 weeks later, Jasmine was sitting in her office in the heart of downtown Dallas, finalizing a contract for a new client when she got an unexpected call from Skylink's corporate office. "Ms. Thompson?" the voice on the other end said, smooth and professional. "This is Claire Henderson, Vice President of Customer Relations at Skylink. I'm calling to personally thank you for your patience in the wake of the incident during your recent flight. I'd also like to extend an offer that I believe will benefit both of us." Jasmine set her tablet aside, intrigued but cautious. "Go ahead." "I won't waste your time," Claire continued. "After reviewing the situation, we've decided to not only offer you a formal apology, but also to extend an invitation for you to take a more active role with Skylink. We value your business immensely, and we recognize your influence in the industry. How would you feel about joining our advisory board? We'd love to have your input on improving our service and customer experience, especially in first class." Jasmine was stunned. This wasn't just an apology. This was an offer of influence. They wanted her voice in their decision-making. She could already hear the wheels of her mind turning. This was bigger than just holding them accountable for one flight. This was about taking control and using her position for greater leverage. "I'm listening," Jasmine said carefully, keeping her voice neutral. "We're not just offering you a seat at the table," Claire added. "We're offering to make you part of the leadership team, bringing your expertise into the fold. We've already taken action on our end. Bradley Mitchell has been reassigned and will undergo a full retraining. But we believe you could help us create a better atmosphere for our first-class passengers and ensure this never happens again." Jasmine paused. She didn't want to rush into anything, but this could be a game changer, not just for her company, but for her future. "I'll think it over," she said after a moment. The conversation ended with both parties agreeing to touch base in the coming days. But Jasmine knew, deep down, that this was an offer she wouldn't be able to turn down. While Skylink had offered Jasmine a path to greater influence, the situation with Bradley wasn't over yet. Jasmine's phone had been buzzing non-stop for days after her confrontation with him. Most of the calls were from her own colleagues and business contacts who had heard the story and were praising her for standing up for herself. But one call, in particular, caught her attention. It was from an old friend, Marcus Henderson, a high-powered lawyer who specialized in corporate contracts. He had been one of her first mentors in the business world, and she trusted him completely. "Jasmine," Marcus said, his voice low and serious, "I've been following the situation with Skylink closely, and I have some advice for you. This goes beyond just a rude flight attendant. You might want to consider taking legal action." Jasmine's brow furrowed. "Legal action?" "Think about it," Marcus said. "You're a major client of theirs. Bradley's behavior could be considered a breach of the implied contract of service. In other words, they owe you. And if you want to send a message to Skylink, make sure they understand how serious this is. Taking legal action could make them think twice before treating other clients like that." Jasmine thought about it. The idea of going public with a lawsuit made her stomach churn. But Marcus was right about one thing. This wasn't just about one flight. It was about power. It was about making sure no one in the future ever had to deal with the kind of disrespect she had experienced. She decided not to take legal action immediately. She'd keep it as a card to play if the situation escalated. For now, she was going to play the long game. A week later, Jasmine was standing in Skylink's corporate headquarters in Dallas, just a few blocks from her own office. The building was modern, sleek, and a perfect reflection of the airline's efforts to rebrand itself in the face of recent criticism. As she walked through the glass doors, Claire Henderson greeted her with a warm smile. "Ms. Thompson, it's so good to see you again. We're thrilled you've agreed to meet with us today." Jasmine smiled politely but kept her guard up. "Thank you for having me." They made their way to a large conference room where the top brass at Skylink were waiting. Jasmine wasn't intimidated. She had sat in rooms with billionaires, CEOs, and industry leaders before. But today, she wasn't just here to talk about business. She was here to make sure Skylink understood that they had crossed a line, and she wasn't going to let it happen again. Jasmine, one of the executives, Richard Walker, began as they all took their seats. "We've made the changes we discussed. Bradley Mitchell has been reassigned, and we're reviewing our first-class customer service policies. But we want your input. As someone who's been on both sides of the business, as a client and for a client, we value what you can bring to the table." Jasmine nodded. This was her moment. "I'm glad you're taking this seriously. But this isn't just about customer service. It's about respect. It's about understanding that your first-class passengers aren't just walking wallets. We're human beings. And it's time you stop assuming that because someone doesn't fit a certain mold, they don't deserve the same level of service." There was a pause. The room was silent. She could see the executives exchanging glances. It was clear they hadn't expected such a direct approach. "I'm prepared to offer more than just feedback," Jasmine continued. "I'm prepared to help you design a whole new customer experience for first class, one that treats everyone with dignity, no matter what they look like or where they come from." Claire Henderson spoke up, her voice more subdued now. "We're open to that. We need to do better. You've shown us that." Jasmine looked around the room, her gaze unwavering. "And I can guarantee you this. I'm not in this for the money. I'm in this because I believe in fairness. If I'm going to be a part of this process, I need to see some genuine change, or else I'll walk away and take my business with me." The silence in the room deepened. The executives nodded slowly. They knew what she was capable of, and they understood that letting Jasmine Thompson walk away now would be a huge mistake. The following month, Skylink made a public announcement. They had hired a diversity consultant to redesign their customer experience and were launching a new initiative aimed at ensuring every passenger received equal treatment, regardless of their status or appearance. The changes went beyond just first class. They were overhauling the entire way they approached customer service. Jasmine's company, the Thompson Group, was officially listed as one of Skylink's partners in the announcement. She had negotiated her way into a seat at the table, not just as an advisor, but as a key figure in their future. But what really shocked everyone, including Bradley, was the company's decision to issue a formal apology to Jasmine during a televised press conference. They not only acknowledged her contributions to the industry, but also credited her for helping them redefine their customer service practices. Skylink was turning a new page, and they were doing it because of her. Bradley Mitchell, now working at a much smaller regional airline, had been left with nothing but the fallout from his actions. He had been publicly reprimanded, and despite his reassignment, the incident followed him everywhere he went. His reputation was tarnished beyond repair. Meanwhile, Jasmine stood at the top of her game, having turned a single flight incident into an opportunity that not only changed her life, but also reshaped an entire company. And in the end, Skylink wasn't the only one who learned a lesson. Jasmine Thompson wasn't just a businesswoman anymore. She was a force to be reckoned with, and she had proven one thing: sometimes it only takes one moment of courage to change everything. Jasmine sat in her downtown Dallas office, reviewing the latest report from her company's marketing team. The numbers were strong, the contracts were rolling in, and things were moving forward smoothly. It had been a few weeks since her speech at Skylink's conference, and the media attention had simmered down. She had hoped that the ripple effect of her actions would spread, but it wasn't until an unexpected email landed in her inbox that she realized how far her influence had really reached. The email was from another airline, a competing carrier. "Ms. Thompson," the subject line read, "we've been following the changes at Skylink closely. We admire the work you've done to push for a better experience for first-class passengers. We'd love to talk about how you can help us with a similar initiative." Jasmine sat back in her chair, reading the email over and over. It wasn't just one airline that had taken notice. It was now an industry-wide conversation. Her phone buzzed again. It was a message from Marcus Henderson, her lawyer and mentor, who had been keeping tabs on the media storm. "I think it's time to go bigger, Jasmine. You've got momentum. This could be the start of a major shift in the industry. Don't let this slip away." Jasmine tapped the screen thoughtfully. Marcus was right. She could either keep riding the wave or let it pass her by. The decision was clear. The following week, Jasmine found herself in another boardroom meeting, but this time it wasn't with just Skylink. This was a summit that included representatives from several major airlines: Delta, American Airlines, and JetBlue. It was an invitation she never thought she'd receive. She walked into the room, greeted by a group of executives all eager to hear her thoughts. They had all seen the headlines. They knew who she was now. "Jasmine, we're glad you could join us," said Peter Roth, the CEO of Delta, who was seated at the head of the table. "We've all been following the work you've done with Skylink. We believe you can help us understand what's next in this industry, especially regarding passenger rights and service equality." The room went silent as all eyes turned to Jasmine. "I've seen a lot in my years of business, but I've never seen such a powerful response to one individual's experience," Jasmine began. "This isn't just about a flight. This is about how we treat people, no matter who they are, where they come from, or what they look like. And it's clear that change is needed." Peter Roth nodded. "Exactly. We want to be proactive, but we need someone with your vision to guide us." The pressure was on, but Jasmine was no longer intimidated. She'd become a voice in the conversation, not just an observer. She knew exactly what needed to be done. "You want to make a difference?" she said, leaning forward. "Then it's time to look at the bigger picture. you need to be transparent. You need to make your commitment to equality not just an internal policy, but something your passengers can see in your branding, your communication, and your actions. It starts with listening to your passengers, but more importantly, it starts with training your employees, your flight attendants, your ground staff, on how to treat people with dignity, respect, and kindness every step of the way. The group nodded, taking notes. Jasmine continued, "But you also need accountability. You need to be willing to publicly acknowledge when you mess up and take action to make it right. That means putting policies in place that not only prevent this kind of incident from happening again, but ensure your passengers know they are heard." The discussion went on for hours, with Jasmine steering the conversation and offering strategies, ideas, and frameworks for airlines to build a customer experience that was inclusive, respectful, and consistent. She was no longer just a passenger with a grievance. She had become a consultant, an advisor that these major players in the airline industry were willing to listen to. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that Jasmine had become more than just a consultant. She was leading a revolution in the airline industry. Skylink wasn't the only airline to take her seriously. Over the next several months, her influence spread, and airlines across the country began to implement her recommendations. Policies were overhauled. Flight attendants and customer service representatives went through intensive retraining programs designed to tackle biases and reinforce empathy. Jasmine had helped bring forth a new standard. And it wasn't just about customer service. It was about reshaping the culture of an entire industry. Meanwhile, the story of Bradley Mitchell, the flight attendant who had started it all, was far from over. After his reassignment to a smaller regional airline, he struggled to find his place. His reputation had been publicly stained by the incident, and his new employer had made it clear that they wouldn't tolerate any repeat behavior. But Bradley was determined to clear his name. It wasn't long before he started a campaign of his own, alleging that his reassignment was part of an unfair targeting of employees due to a single incident. He began reaching out to media outlets, seeking to flip the narrative. "I was just doing my job," Bradley claimed in an interview with a local news station. "I was following protocol. This woman took it personally, and now they're ruining my career over one mistake." Jasmine watched the interview, shaking her head. She wasn't surprised. She knew Bradley wouldn't take responsibility for his actions. He still didn't understand the deeper issues at play. But she also knew this was part of the process. The pushback that would come when the status quo started to shift. Jasmine's company, the Thompson Group, continued to thrive, and her influence in the airline industry grew. But with great power came great scrutiny. Not everyone was happy about the changes she was advocating for. She began to receive hate mail, anonymous messages, and even threats from people who felt that the industry was being forced to change too quickly. One afternoon, as Jasmine was heading into a meeting, her assistant handed her an envelope. She tore it open. It was a letter, typed out neatly, but with an unmistakable edge. "You're going too far. Don't think we've forgotten what you started. People like you will ruin this industry if you keep pushing. We'll make sure you regret it." Her heart skipped a beat, but she didn't let it show. This wasn't the first threat she'd received. It was the price of making waves in an industry that had long been resistant to change. She tucked the letter into her desk drawer and continued with her day. Jasmine Thompson had fought too hard and come too far to back down now. But just as things were starting to get more intense, an unexpected ally reached out. It was one of Skylink's executives, Claire Henderson. "I know this isn't easy," Claire said on the phone, "but we want you to know that we have your back. Skylink has made mistakes, but we believe in the changes you're advocating for. And we're prepared to stand by you even when the pressure builds." Jasmine felt a small sense of relief. After everything she'd been through, hearing those words meant more than she could express. She had started a movement, and she wasn't backing down. Months later, as the airlines across the country began to embrace the changes Jasmine had helped set in motion, a bombshell dropped. A leaked internal memo from a rival airline surfaced. It revealed that several major carriers had been secretly working together to prevent the kinds of reforms Jasmine had pushed for. An alliance designed to block any meaningful change in the industry, but that's when Jasmine realized she wasn't just fighting for passengers' rights. She was up against an entrenched system of power and profit. Now, more than ever, Jasmine knew she had to take her fight to the next level. It wasn't just about the airlines anymore. It was about standing up for what was right, regardless of the cost. It had been nearly a year since the confrontation with Bradley Mitchell, and Jasmine had become a name known not just in the tech world, but in boardrooms across the country. Her leadership in the airline industry had sparked conversations in every corner of the business world. It wasn't just about customer service. It was about equity, dignity, and what kind of experience passengers were entitled to, no matter their background or gender. However, with all the success, the pressure was mounting. Her personal life had become increasingly difficult to manage. Her company was facing constant media attention, and every decision she made seemed to be scrutinized. Her office phone rang early one Monday morning, snapping her out of her thoughts. The voice on the other end was one she knew too well, Claire Henderson from Skylink. "Jasmine, we need to talk. I'm not sure if you've seen the latest news, but I think you're going to want to hear this." Jasmine sat up straighter. "What's going on?" "It's about the leaked memo," Claire continued. "We're not the only ones dealing with this. The industry is in crisis. Several executives at some of the largest airlines in the country have been found to be coordinating efforts to block your reforms." Jasmine's heart sank. She had known there would be resistance, but this was something else entirely. To think that entire networks of executives had been conspiring to halt progress was a wake-up call. This wasn't just a battle over customer service policies. It was a war over power and control. "You're telling me they've been working together to undermine the changes?" Jasmine asked, trying to process the gravity of the situation. "Exactly," Claire said. "It's not just Skylink. It's multiple carriers. They've been trying to discredit your work, planting negative stories in the press, and even pressuring government officials to halt any legislation that could force them to comply with your recommendations." Jasmine felt a wave of frustration wash over her. She'd known the road wouldn't be easy, but this was a new level of manipulation. It wasn't enough to quietly oppose her. It was a coordinated, full-scale effort to stop her momentum. "I won't let them win," Jasmine said, her voice cold with resolve. "We need to expose this. We need to show the world just how deep this goes." That evening, Jasmine called a meeting with her closest allies. Marcus Henderson, Her longtime mentor and lawyer was the first to arrive. He looked at her gravely as she laid out the situation. "We need to go public with this," Jasmine said. "I'll expose what they're doing. We can't let them block real change just because they're scared of losing power." Marcus listened carefully, his face a picture of concern. "I agree, but this isn't just a matter of leaking information. You're going up against an industry that holds incredible sway in Washington and with the public. You're dealing with people who have far more resources than you do." "I don't care about their resources," Jasmine replied firmly. "I care about doing what's right. If they want a war, they're going to get one." Marcus paused. He could see the fire in her eyes, and he knew that trying to talk her out of it would be pointless. "Then we need to be strategic. If you release this too early, it could backfire. You'll need allies, other companies, influencers, people who believe in your cause." Jasmine nodded. She had already started reaching out to other business leaders, activists, and organizations. They would stand by her, and she knew they could turn the tide. It was no longer just about one woman's fight for equality. It was about the people she could unite to stand for what was right. "I'm ready," Jasmine said. "Let's do this." The next week, Jasmine arranged a press conference. She called in media from across the country, including major news networks, business magazines, and social justice organizations. The tension in the room was palpable as reporters sat, ready to hear what Jasmine had to say. Jasmine took a deep breath before stepping up to the podium, the weight of the moment heavy on her shoulders. Her mind raced. This wasn't just a story. This was her fight for everything she believed in. "Good afternoon," she began. "I stand before you today not just as a passenger or a businesswoman, but as a person who believes in fairness, respect, and accountability. For too long, the airline industry has ignored the needs of passengers, particularly women, minorities, and business professionals who have been subject to discriminatory treatment." She paused, letting her words sink in. "And today, I am here to tell you the truth. Several of the largest airlines in this country have been colluding behind closed doors to block the reforms that I have worked tirelessly to put into place. They've been coordinating efforts to suppress any changes that would make the airline experience better for everyone. They've gone so far as to manipulate public opinion and lobby against legislation aimed at ensuring a fair and respectful environment for all passengers." A collective gasp rippled through the room as journalists scribbled down notes. Jasmine continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. "They've tried to silence me, but I won't back down. I will fight for every passenger who has ever been mistreated. This is not just about me. It's about all of us who deserve to be treated with dignity, regardless of who we are or where we come from." She went on to reveal the contents of the leaked memo, a document that outlined how several major airlines had been working together to stifle her reforms. She didn't hold back, naming names and offering proof. The memo outlined meetings between executives at American Airlines, Delta, and JetBlue, where they discussed how best to undermine the changes Jasmine had been pushing for. By the end of the conference, Jasmine had successfully launched an undeniable attack on the airline's leadership. The media was buzzing. The backlash was swift and fierce. Social media erupted with hashtags in her support. People shared their own stories of mistreatment by airlines, demanding that changes be made. But Jasmine knew this was only the beginning. She had made her move, and the industry was scrambling, But there would be no turning back now. Within hours of the press conference, the airline industry pushed back hard. Statements from the carriers involved were released, claiming that the leaked memo had been taken out of context and that any coordination had been misinterpreted. They denied all accusations and doubled down on their position that the reforms Jasmine was advocating for were too drastic and would harm the industry. Bradley Mitchell, the former flight attendant who had been at the center of the controversy, reappeared in the media, ready to strike. He appeared on several news shows, claiming that Jasmine had orchestrated the entire campaign for personal gain, casting doubt on her motives and calling her a puppet of the media. But Jasmine wasn't fazed. She knew this was coming. The backlash was expected, and it didn't scare her. What frightened them was the power of the truth and the people who were starting to rally behind her. As the weeks went by, the airline industry found itself in turmoil. Passengers started organizing boycotts of the airlines involved in the scandal. Protests were held outside major airports. The public was outraged that such widespread corruption had been allowed to fester. But it wasn't just the passengers who were angry. Employees began to speak out too. Flight attendants, pilots, and ground crew who had silently endured mistreatment themselves started sharing their stories, revealing how they were pressured to maintain a certain image and perpetuate the policies that had long been discriminatory. Jasmine's phone rang constantly. New allies reached out from all corners of the country. Civil rights organizations, labor unions, politicians, and even celebrities who had felt the sting of inequality in their own experiences with the airline industry. It was clear now. This wasn't just Jasmine's fight. It was everyone's fight. The industry was unraveling. The pressure was mounting on the airlines to act. One by one, they began to make concessions, small changes to their policies, offers of compensation to affected passengers, and even the implementation of new diversity training programs. But it was too little, too late. The public had lost trust. Jasmine stood at the precipice of something huge. Her battle had become a revolution. It wasn't about one flight anymore. It was about something much larger. Now, Jasmine had one final choice to make. Should she continue the fight for gradual change, or should she push for a sweeping overhaul that could redefine the entire airline industry forever? Her next move would be the one that sealed her legacy. Jasmine paced in her office, eyes glued to the television screen. The news was relentless. Broadcasts from across the country were covering the airline industry's collapse. The public was enraged, and the pressure on the major carriers was mounting by the hour. The public outcry was deafening, and for the first time, it seemed that the balance of power was shifting away from the industry and back into the hands of the people. But she knew it wasn't over yet. The airlines were not going down without a fight. They had already begun to make small gestures, apologetic ads, promises of change, and settlements to passengers who had suffered under their mistreatment. But Jasmine wasn't satisfied with their token gestures. The phone rang. It was Claire Henderson, the Skylink executive who had become her ally. "Jasmine," Claire said, her voice serious, "we need to meet. I have news, and it's big. It's something I think you need to know before you make your next move." Jasmine's heart raced. She had been expecting this moment, the moment where everything either came together or fell apart. "What's going on?" "I'll explain when you get here," Claire replied, urgency in her voice. Jasmine arrived at the Skylink headquarters, her thoughts swirling. She was no longer just a businesswoman pushing for change. She was the face of a movement, and her every decision was being watched. When she entered the meeting room, Claire was waiting for her with a grave expression. "I don't know how to say this, but this is bigger than we thought," Claire began. She slid a thick folder across the table. Jasmine opened it, and her eyes quickly scanned the pages inside. Inside were confidential emails, recordings, and documents. Proof that the airline giants weren't just blocking Jasmine's reforms. They were actively sabotaging public opinion. Not only had they been coordinating to suppress the reforms, but they had begun using underhanded tactics to turn the public against her. There were plans to frame her as a media-driven diva, someone who was out of touch with the realities of the airline industry. "This is no longer just about customer service," Jasmine said, her voice tight. "This is a war over perception, over control. They're trying to paint me as the villain." "They're scared of you, Jasmine," Claire responded, her voice resolute. "But you don't have to fight this alone anymore. We have the proof. We can expose them for who they really are." Jasmine paused, letting the weight of the situation sink in. She had the evidence now, irrefutable proof that the industry she had worked so hard to improve was willing to go to any length to discredit her. But she knew this was her moment to finally take them down. "We go public," Jasmine said, her voice unwavering. "This ends now. We can't let them win." In a press conference unlike any other, Jasmine stood before the media once again. But this time, she wasn't just revealing her personal story or even exposing an injustice. This was the final confrontation. It was about taking down the powers that be, and she wasn't going to hold back. "The time for apologies and empty promises is over," she began. "Today, I stand before you with undeniable proof that the airline industry has been actively working to suppress the truth. These companies, American Airlines, Delta, JetBlue, have been engaging in a campaign of misinformation and manipulation. They have used their power to undermine real, positive change in the airline industry." She held up a thick stack of documents, each page a piece of evidence that would change everything. "These documents, emails, recordings, prove that they were trying to destroy me, to destroy the very idea of equality and respect in air travel, but I'm not afraid of them, and I'm not going anywhere." The media erupted. The floodgates had opened. Her phone began to ring off the hook. Journalists clamoring for interviews, public support flooding in from all corners of the country. People were outraged, but they were also galvanized by the truth. The media storm reached a fever pitch. Protesters gathered at airports. Passengers called out the airline's deceit. The country was now fully aware of the underhanded tactics that the airline industry had been using to stop progress. And then the final blow came. It wasn't just the media or the passengers who were outraged. The government stepped in. Investigations were launched. The Department of Transportation began probing into the practices of the major airlines, and public hearings were scheduled. For the first time, lawmakers were listening. Jasmine's fight had reached the highest levels of government, and change was now inevitable. In the months that followed, the airline industry began to change in ways that Jasmine had only dreamed of. Skylink, having been one of the first to adopt her reforms, became a symbol of the new era. Other airlines followed suit, reluctantly implementing the changes that Jasmine had fought for. But it wasn't just the airlines that had to change. The entire landscape of corporate America was shifting. Jasmine had not only exposed the corruption in the airline industry, but she had sparked a conversation that transcended air travel. It was about corporate responsibility, fairness, and equality. She didn't stop at airlines. She began advising other industries on how to implement her principles, building a consultancy that would reshape the corporate world forever. Her phone buzzed one last time that year. It was a message from Marcus. "You did it. You changed the world." Jasmine smiled, but her work wasn't over. She knew that real change was a journey, not a destination. Years passed, and Jasmine became a household name. She wasn't just a businesswoman, she was an icon of change. The airline industry had transformed, and so had countless other industries around the world. Companies were now held accountable for their treatment of customers and employees. Transparency became the standard, and respect became a non-negotiable value. Jasmine Thompson had led the charge, and the world would never be the same. As she looked out the window of her office one final time, she reflected on the journey. She had faced down the biggest giants in the industry, fought for what was right, and ultimately won. But she knew, deep down, that this victory was only possible because of the people who had supported her along the way. The passengers, the employees, the activists, and the people who believed in the cause. The fight for equality and respect in every industry was far from over. But Jasmine Thompson had paved the way for a new world, one where no one would ever be silenced again. Personally, I was shocked by the lengths the airlines went to suppress change. What about you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. This wraps up the final part of the story, culminating in a powerful conclusion where Jasmine triumphs against the overwhelming odds. The story reflects the struggle for fairness and the long-lasting impact of standing up for what's right. Let me know if you'd like any adjustments or further elaboration.